The graduation. Eventually, the sun disappeared from the sky, and Nightingale found herself standing in the largest ballroom in the city of Alinea. Even the large space had trouble containing the graduates and their families. She shifted uncomfortably in her gown, trying to ignore the sheer volume of people watching. Being a princess is way less awesome than it is in the movies, she thought as she forced herself to be polite for each and every trite greeting and congratulations. How many of the complete strangers accosting her were doing the same for the other graduates? Nightingale glanced down at the tables seated in rows on the lower level of the ballroom and couldn't help but wish she was sitting with all the other normal students. They were having a good time with their own families, unbothered by the constant barrage of the pompous elite. The special treatment bothered her, and it looked like Zeke got about as much of it as she did, though he was a little less graceful about accepting it. Just behind her, Remy received only confused or suspicious looks by the other royalty. By now, Nightingale had noticed Balthazar's and Kezia's aversion to the girl, though she didn't know why. Between a break of compliments on her graduation, Nightingale saw a familiar face shift in the crowds nearby. "I think I see Rook up there," Nightingale said, pointing. Remy's eyes flickered, following her gesture into the crowd. "Follow me!" Nightingale grabbed Remy's hand and waded through the well-dressed people of all kinds, passing between tables piled high with dignified hors d'oeuvres and uninteresting drinks. Rook was standing only a few feet from a raised platform in the center, chatting animatedly with a boy with giant wings hanging from his back. "Hey!" Nightingale waved, hurrying the rest of the way over. "I was planning on introducing you guys to Khufu tonight. Looks like you've already met him." Nightingale looked around, searching to see if Rook's parents were somewhere nearby. After the way they had acted, Nightingale was a little surprised they weren't. That meeting Rook's parents mentioned must have gone pretty well if he was talking to Khufu. Nightingale wondered if he might have even been invited to the Demiurge. She could think of no other explanation for why Rook was waiting at the table with the rest of the Demiurge soldiers Balthazar usually retained as his personal guard. If they invited Rook, maybe I've got a chance too, Nightingale thought excitedly. Her tail flicked behind her at the thought. Nightingale suddenly noticed that Remy was ruffling her wings a little. "This is your friend from Earth?" Remy asked with a smile. Khufu glanced at Nightingale. "Are you telling everyone about our high school shenanigans? I thought we agreed that those times were under lock and key. I mean, not everything." Nightingale glanced sideways. Then she looked back at Khufu. "How am I not supposed to tell people that I have a friend from Earth here on Madara, though?" "You didn't tell me he had wings." Remy leaned to inspect Khufu's red, large wings. "They're gorgeous." "Wing buddies!" Khufu held out his hand for a high five. Remy jumped up and smacked it. Nightingale giggled, and then Khufu and Remy looked at her expectantly. "Oh, sorry," she squeaked. "I guess you met Rook, but not Remy. Remy, this is Khufu." They exchanged a few pleasantries, though Remy was suddenly bubbling with energy. "These look big enough to actually work." "They are," Khufu said, ruffling his own wings a little. "They've come in handy in a few tight spots, haven't they, Nightingale?" "That's right. Usually not my fault we needed to be bailed out, though." Nightingale slapped him on the back with a wide grin. "Of course not." Khufu lowered his head in a mock deference. "A princess of Alinea could make no mistakes." "A princess of Alinea also couldn't attend a party," Zeke interjected, popping into the conversation from seemingly nowhere. He looked around with disappointment. "Now my uncle, he knows how to throw a real party. Too bad we're too dignified to attend such crass and wasteful gatherings." Nightingale found herself laughing at Zeke's impression of his mother. Nightingale had stumbled into more than one of Ida's lectures during her time living in the Zhang mansion, and although they were always directed at Zeke, she knew that Ida expected just as much from her. Someone tapped her on the shoulder and Nightingale turned, half expecting another total stranger to waste more of her time with empty congratulations. Instead, she found herself facing her sister. "Congratulations on graduating, Nightingale! I knew you could do it!" Shayless wasted no time pulling her into yet another embrace. Yeah, Nightingale pushed herself free. "I had good teachers." Nightingale glanced around, searching the nearby crowd. "Hey, have you seen Antoinette? The other Zhangs are here. I was really hoping to say hi." Zeke's sister seemed to be the only one that got out from under the thumb of the politics of her family, and Nightingale had always wanted to ask how she did it. If there was a time she'd be able to have time to chat with her, it'd be now. "She isn't here, unfortunately," Shayless answered. "Antoinette is off doing her Pirates of the Caribbean thing." Nightingale lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Lady Ida snaps at Zeke for using the wrong salad fork, but lets one of her daughters sail off to be a pirate?" "Privateer," Shayless corrected. She seemed to deflate a little, sighing. "And that's..." She struggled for a moment, then shrugged. Complicated. I'm sure it is, Nightingale said. I'd love to know her secret. Obstinance, Shayless muttered. Her father was the only one she listened to. With him gone, I'd have never figured out how to control her. Luckily, Zeke doesn't give her much trouble. Shayless shot Zeke a look. Yeah, Zeke shrugged. I'd not worry too much about it, Knight. I never see her either. God knows I've heard Ida talk enough about her. I probably know her better than Shayless. Well, she has the right idea. I'd love to be a pirate. Nightingale then excitedly turned. Remy! She reached out and grabbed at her new friend's wrist and pulled her forward. My sister Shayless, she said as a crude introduction. I feel like I'm on display, Remy said, exasperated, and then smiled at Shayless. Nice to meet you again, Princess. Remy scratched the back of her head and scrunched her face. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to curtsy or bow or take your hand or... Shayless gave her a long look and then finally smiled. It's okay. Shayless is fine. No need for formalities. I'm guessing Nightingale invited you. Yes, Prince Shayless, Remy stuttered. I hope that isn't a problem. Yeah, Nightingale said, putting a hand on her hip. I hope it isn't a problem. Shayless's lips curled into a genuine smile that showed her teeth. Of course not. You can hang around whoever you'd like. Unless it's me. Khufu stepped up and lifted Shayless's hand and nodded respectfully. Princess, good to see you again. Khufu, I hope the Xiangs have been utilizing their skills well. Or should I say, your free ticket into the Demiurge. Balthazar didn't want me around his awesome daughter. What can I say? Khufu fist-bumped Nightingale without taking his eyes off Shayless. It's not like they'd go any easier on me. I swear Balthazar is hoping I'd get myself killed. Nightingale nervously laughed. He wouldn't do that. Then she glanced toward Shayless. Would he? Shayless only smiled. Rook's a lucky man, Khufu said, glancing back towards the towering shape behind him. Rook was deep in conversation with the other Demiurge. Nightingale watched him with envy. So they're going to train him then? Let him in? Nightingale stopped talking as the room around them became suddenly silent at the approach of new arrivals. She didn't even have to look to know who it would be. King Balthazar and her older brother Yol, the heir apparent, entered the ballroom. Yol walked at the lead, his face as sharp as the suit he wore. He barely seemed to slow as he approached them. Good work, little sister. He didn't wait for her response, continuing on to the table where Queen Kezia was already saving several seats. King Balthazar was the picture of regal bearing, his armor glittering and polished and his beard immaculately trimmed. What he lacked in grace, he made up in confidence, only accentuated by the scars on his face and the streaks of gray in his beard. Balthazar continued to the waiting stage. He stopped there, tapping one finger on the edge of the podium, quieting down the rest of the room before speaking. We gather here today to celebrate the accomplishments of each and every one of you who've completed the mast. As you leave the Institute and enter Alinea as citizens, carry the lessons you have learned with you. Do not be fooled into thinking that agelessness means immortality, and that the rising generation does not need you. You all are the strength of our great country. It will depend on your contributions in the years and decades ahead. There was polite applause from around the room. Balthazar waited for silence before he continued. Madara might not be the world you know best, but we hope now we have given you the tools to call it home. Nightingale didn't wait a moment before she had to. As soon as her father stepped down from the platform and the party resumed, she was at his side. He didn't seem surprised, only a little wary. Yes, Nightingale? The sound of conversation had picked up all around them, and she made sure to keep her voice quiet enough that it wouldn't carry. She shuffled uneasily from foot to foot, her tail twitching behind her. She spent just a few more seconds getting up the courage. Then it all came tumbling out in a rush. I'd like to join the Demiurge. I know it's a little strange to have a member of the royal family join the ones who protect them, but Dominic did it before he died, and Khufu will vouch for me. And now that you've let Rook join, we could totally train together. Balthazar silenced her with a raised hand, and the rest of her words petered out like the last drops from a faucet. I'm sorry, Nightingale. That just isn't possible. He turned away from the table as though to make for one of the doors. She probably should have let him go, but she didn't. Nightingale hadn't fought through 3 hellish days of mass testing just to give up on her dream without a fight. She reached out, catching him by the arm. Wait! Several people watching gawked, and nearby conversations fell to a hush. She ignored them all. Please, Father! I know you're skeptical of anything that might put me in danger, but that's the exact opposite of what this is. You didn't think being better prepared was putting Dominic in danger. Balthazar frowned at the mention of his dead son's name before raising his voice. Your older brother was twice the warrior you are. Balthazar turned, his expression growing firm. He had the wisdom and skill of many years before he qualified to join the Demiurge. But Rook! Rook wasn't accepted into Demiurge training. Balthazar's voice raised another few decibels. I don't know if you remember, but he saved your life from an Earth Loa during the mast when you failed to use the Bellicose Cube in a reasonable amount of time. I made him into your personal knight. Knight? But... You're important to this kingdom, Nightingale, he interrupted. So important that I felt it necessary to keep you protected at all times. Alinea needs you right where you are. Well, maybe I don't care. Nightingale ignored the fact that her father towered over her and that at least a dozen people were staring at them. My real family didn't love me because I was useful. They loved me because they were my family. Balthazar sighed and forcefully calmed himself before replying. Your real family is right here, Nightingale. Don't think that a few years on Earth will change an eternity waiting for you here in Alinea. Those years on Earth don't change how much your mother and I care about you. She turned her back on him, tail swishing furiously behind her. Could have fooled me. She didn't wait for a response, didn't even look at him. Nightingale stalked away, each step angrier than the last as she made her way to her friend's table. By the time she arrived, the party had gotten back into full swing and her friends had all sat down to eat. Hey, Zeke! She didn't sit down. Zeke looked up from the table behind a freshly lit cigarette that was hanging out of one corner of his mouth. Yeah? That uncle of yours, the one that throws the crazy ragers? Yoon? Yeah, Yoon. Nightingale leaned closer to him. Is he doing anything tonight? And could you get us into the party? Of course. Zeke briefly glanced around, not seeing any ashtrays before extinguishing his cigarette against the white tablecloth. I'm not sure that's wise, Nightingale. Rook spoke from across the table, voice even. Your family probably expects you to remain here for their party. Nightingale tensed, turning away. She was probably speaking a little too loudly as she replied, I don't give a damn what they expect right now. You don't get too close either. You're my knight now, aren't you? Zeke raised an eyebrow at the comment but let it go. All right. Zeke rose from a slouch. I was planning on heading over there when this one got too boring anyway. Rook rose as well, looking down. Guess I'm coming too then. Remy remained where she was, staring at the table. Maybe she expected them to take off, leaving her alone at their table. Instead, Nightingale rested one hand briefly on her shoulder. You coming, Remy? I bet we'll have way more fun at a real party. Yeah. She practically jumped to her feet, a little too quickly. I mean, yes. That sounds fantastic. She straightened, and together they left the graduation party behind.